Hello, everyone, and welcome to this spoiler review for episode 3 of Willow from the
Geek Buddies! Buddies! Shannon McClung!
There you go.
Hope he doesn't listen to that. I'm going to get in trouble.
I'm sure he will. Well, look, he made fun of you when you weren't on here, so I think it's only...
What?
We got so much to jump into here, Mike, with episode 3, The Path of the Slaughtered Lamb. Is beset by... No, I was going to do the Ezekiel quote, but no, let's leave it alone. But yeah, a lot going on in this episode for sure. We're seeing a little bit more of the mystery around Mardigan, what happened to him, and the connection there with Boorman. Also, Kit getting a little more information about that situation as well. We're also seeing Elora Danan running into two people, look like a tangent out of the Wizard of Oz, running into two woodsmen who are sitting there working on stuff and pledging their allegiance to Elora Danan, much to their fatal results there. And also we get a little bit more with Graydon we get a little more of his inner story about him wanting to be a hero and always kind of blowing it at the critical moment. Ballantine here, we get him stealing Elora, certainly seeing him and Jade having a back and forth about his situation and all of that. So much to explore. And Willow hesitating when to use the magic, when not to use the magic. And sadly, we have ourselves a death by the end of the episode. So a lot happening in here. And we're going to jump into all of it. So, Michael, right off the bat, I always like to ask this overall thoughts on this episode 3 here, Willow.
I thought it was fine. Mm-hmm. I think that, it's sort of like what we talked about last week. No, I mean, like I said, the nostalgia for Willow is going to carry me through. The nostalgia for Willow is going to carry me through. It's really funny because I was making my notes and I was like going through what happened. And I really think, and I don't know, I do wish Shannon was here to talk about this because I don't know if it's something about some of the performances, if it's in the way that things are being directed, because on paper, you got a lot going on with these characters. Like I said last week, we have a really good sense of who these characters are. There's lots of inner turmoil and strife within the Fellowship. Lots of big epic things happening with the Crone and the opening of this portal. Like there's a lot going on. We've got this whole backstory about the Chimerian Kuros. Like there's so many things going on, and it all really relatively works. Like it all makes sense, and yet I still kind of left this episode by the end kind of being like, okay. It just doesn't, there's something about it that doesn't quite fully engage me. I do, like I said last week, I find the action sequences to be completely serviceable, and aside from one thing in one of this week's episodes, it all is very clear and makes perfect sense, and I can see what's happening and it's all good. So like it's checking all the boxes, and yet at the same time, I'm not like leaving these episodes going, oh fuck. Yeah. God, that was great. And so I wish I was, but I'm still having a good time. I have a lot to talk about. I have a lot of thoughts on a lot of the different things here. Stuff that I thought was interesting, stuff that I thought was cool, interesting nods back to the original movie. But I'm not coming out of these episodes just completely bowled over.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat in that there's enough here to keep me watching. There really is. I like the characters. I like that we're spending more time with them fleshing that. Does the humor still not work for me? Yeah, pretty much most of the time, except when Boorman's dropping his lines. I like his humor. It seems a bit forced with the other actors when they're hitting their humor moments, and I kind of lose a little bit of the rhythm of the show. I wish there was less of that, not less of the humor rather, but a little more of a pointed shot, like a sniper shot instead of a machine gun fire shot of humor. I think I'd appreciate that a little bit more, but I do like the action sequences. I do like the way they're having these relationships develop and the twists and turns, like finding out that Jade had let Kit win for all these years.
Yeah.
Possibly that Jade had been asked to be Kit's friend, and we find out how that could change the dynamic of this relationship as well going forward. So I like the way they're fleshing this out piece by piece, step by step. And even a cantankerous Willow is a nice, interesting energy to throw on this, whereas in the first movie, he's very much like, we got to go do this. We got to go save everybody. He's much more older now. He's much more circumspect now. He's got a different point of view on a lot of things. Even when his power is threatened a little bit, he has to push back when Graydon is starting to quote stuff about the crone and about the evil magic. And we see Graydon, and that's another thing I like developing as well. We see Graydon all of a sudden become an essential part of this fellowship, as you said, Michael, being able to interpret the language that the crone is speaking, wanting to step up, wanting to release Elora and save her later on, wanting to step up. And then, of course, it is his him being in danger that ends up costing the life of Willow's friend there. So there's so much here that we got. Did it all 100% work? No, but enough is here to keep me watching for sure. And, before we go forward, Mike, we should give big love to Carbon Health, who continues to power and sponsor us here on the Geek Buddies, carbonhealth.com. Go and visit them today for virtual care, in-person care, whatever you need. Got some mental health stuff going on. They, especially during the holidays, reach out to them and see what they've got available to you, or download the app to have a doc in your pocket on the go.
You get possessed by the crone, you get bit by a weir rat. Like, Carbon Health is where you want to be at, guys. Those weir rat bites, in fact, you let a weir rat bite go without getting the proper antibiotics. Next thing you know, you wake up with one big tooth in the front and a tail, and it is nobody's friend. All you want to do is eat cheese. So definitely go to Carbon Health if you get your weir rat bites.
That's for sure. You don't want to end up like Kit threatening Boorman to want to taste his flesh first. That's for sure. All right, so we're going to break this thing down, talk about it in sections, probably 3 sections, and go through it real quick. Let's start off here. Mike, we start out with Boorman telling a story about how the legend of the Chimerian cuirass. We learn how it was crafted by a mother whose son was the true Krang in order to defeat his evil brother. Maybe there'll be some foreshadowing of something like that happening later on in the show. Most importantly, we learn that it works when paired with the Lux Arcana, which is the key that unlocks the cuirass's power to those who are worthy. Can I ask you real quick, does it ever veer into video game? Like, do you ever start to think in your mind when you're watching shows like this, when they start to throw these kinds of stories out there with these kinds of titles for these things, you start to think to yourself, oh, they're already thinking about the video game they're going to make off of this. Does that ever occur to you?
No, it doesn't, but I do think, I think between video games and fantasy novels and fantasy movies, like, there's only so many legends in the world that we all riff off of. And, so this is, the worthy... The one who's worthy can wear the Chimerian cuirass versus the one who is worthy can wield the hammer versus the one who is worthy will pull the sword from the stone. Right. I think the only part that veers into like video game territory is that the Lux Arcana is kind of this steampunky thing that inserts into the armor and twists, and that kind of had a sort of I'm on my PS5 vibe to it. Yeah, but the rest of it, I was like, all right, this is pretty tried and true mythology stuff that we're going into here.
Fair enough. I mean, the Lux Arcana sounds like a hotel in Vegas as well, so who knows? But anyway, Kit banters with Boorman back and forth. I kind of like their chemistry between each other. It seems like they both understand the pacing of their back and forths here. She literally does a terrible pun by a Shannon McClung level pun, saying that he's a Boorman man. So what's that?
No, I'm sure Shannon, when he was watching this, like in his COVID haze, was like, "Ha ha, Boorman."
But she just wants to get to more about her dad already. She's kind of bored with the story, even though she said she does like tales. But before Boorman can tell her, as he's going into his deeper voice, they find out that Elora is gone. And Kit is pretty flabbergasted about all of this, kind of walking around going, how many times can this person take off? They all kind of spread out to try to find her. But Kit sees the remnants of Elora's magic here from the last episode, which we saw that growing out of the ground. So maybe Kit's slowly but surely coming around, and we see Ballantine tying Elora to his horse. Jade comes up on him because apparently he is slow-moving and no rush to get out of there with Elora, and tries to reason with him. We have this really interesting back and forth that kind of belies a little more of a relationship between them than we were initially presented in the first couple of episodes, or we deepen that relationship, I guess I would say. That's a better way to interpret it. The rest of the crew shows up behind Jade, starting with Willow, and then Ballantine's crew shows up. They battle. Ballantine gets away with Elora after Graydon can't release her in time. A chase ensues, but they don't catch up because of the wagon issues. Graydon talks about his inability to show up in the big game, talking to Willow. Everyone stops, and we hear the crones speaking narcotic, I guess, talking, and Graydon
narcotic. Yeah, I think, yeah.
Narcotic? Is it narcotic? Narcotic? Okay.
I think narcotic. That's what I got out of it.
We hear that killing her would be a mistake from Willow, but they can banish her, which is what they were trying to do to Elora in the movie. Elora cuts herself free because they are hampered by the wheel issues, hampered by the wagon, and of course the crone down there. We cut to Kit and Jade now later talking by the river, and we find out that Jade let Kit win in these fights. and that Rocha asked her to be Kit's friend initially. So, Mike, a lot in these sections here going on between these characters, a little more of the mythology, a little more of what was going on with Mardigan and Boorman for sure, but then also seeing Elora, Kit coming around with Elora just a little bit, and seeing a change in the relationship here between Jade and Kit, but also a little more with Graydon and with Willow too. So what's your thoughts on all this stuff here? And Ballantine, of course, taking Elora.
Well, first, like, the mythology stuff is really interesting because this is all new information. I mean, like, we know from the first Willow movie that Elora Danan was, the blood of Chimeria. Like, she is descended from these people that Boorman is telling the story about. As I understand it, but yeah, really interesting stuff. So that you had this young prince named Thule who was kind of sick but was supposed to take over. His younger brother Tiberius thought he would be the better king, and then their mother Anne, Annabelle, who is Fae, so is fairy of the fair folk. Made this magical armor for them. So, like, they're really building up this Chimerian cuirass and the Lux Arcana and what it can do. And whenever you get a story that's sort of laid out in little snippets like this, in this case, because Kit just wants to get to the good stuff about Mad Mardigan, it always seems like there's going to be more to the story than you think. Like, right now, it seems pretty cut and dry. You had the good son who was sickly, the bad son who wanted to take him down, fairy mom made the cool armor, and that's the story. But because they're making such a big deal out of the Chimerian cuirass, and then even something that Boorman says later on makes me wonder if there's more to this story, more to what the cuirass does. Like, it's just going to be really interesting to see where all of this goes. Obviously, by the end of this episode, it looks like we have one piece of the puzzle with the Lux Arcana in Boorman's hand. So I think that's all really interesting stuff. And because they're really giving us full flashbacks and leaning into it, really curious as how it's going to tie into the mythology around the crone and what and the Gales and the worm and all of these things that they're throwing out and how it's all going to go together. So I think that's all really, really interesting.
Yeah.
As far as the rest of it, Kit finding out. I mean, Kit pretty much looks like she's got confirmation now that Elora Danan can do magic. I mean, that bush looked like it did not fit, did not belong there, and it looked like she was doing the math. The action sequence is great. I think all the stuff between Jade and Ballantine was really lovely. I think they both did a really nice job of, this was a nice job of, without giving you a very expository backstory of I raised you from the time that you're like a dog. Like, they didn't say it all, but the actors were still kind of playing it, and I thought it worked really, really nice. The entire action sequence, again, this falls into the category of, like, it all worked. The beats were there. You've got the Jade Ballantine stuff. You've got Graydon kind of being like, this isn't really my jam. Like, you got Boorman coming in with the funny one-liners. I will say, to your point, John, I do think the comedy works the best with Boorman because I do think he's probably one of the better actors. Like, he delivers that the tone they're going for, which, as I said last week, is the tone that you should have for Willow. Willow is epic fantasy that has some anachronistic humor to it. So the writing of it on the page, probably you're like, oh, fuck, this is Willow. But nailing that balance of knowing when to fall on one side or the other is a little bit harder to do. And I do think Boorman does do it the best.
Yeah, his comment coming in going, can you get a recap for me? Okay, I'll do it myself. Like, that was kind of funny, considering he'd just been telling this long tale.
Exactly.
Nice change. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, the action sequence, I just kind of wanted more out of it. Like, I really think I just think in general, like, when you get to an action sequence in a show like this, that's a moment where the writing and the plot and stuff, like, the action sequence is less about I need to know exactly what happened and more about just the fun of really shooting in a really interesting way. And it just doesn't seem like that is the forte of the creative team here on Willow behind the camera. So I always know it's a little wanting. And also in this case, got very confused about what happened at the end. Like, Willow threw the smoke bomb now, like whatever it was he threw down, and it looked like it was supposed to be his gambit to, like, get Elora away. But then the smoke clears and the bad guys took off. Like, it looked like Willow helped the bad guy. I mean, I know not intentionally, but... And then, when you set up something like your big sorcerer did a fucking dumbass move and the bad guys got away, nobody kind of was like, hey, dude.
Yeah.
So, like, it was just this weird moment that kind of brought the battle to an end, and I was kind of like, wait, what just happened? So it wasn't super clear on all of that. But yeah, then the stuff with Kit and Jade, I think like the Kit and Jade stuff is super interesting to me. Like the back and forth between them, and then this big realization that like I've been letting you win. You're not the badass that you think you are. I mean, for someone who's been swaggering around for 2 episodes, acting like they were like, hey, I want to go on adventures. I don't want to do this. Like I'm the badass. Like to find out you're not the badass, that's really interesting. So love the dynamic between the two of them. Really like the dynamic between Kit and Boorman. So, you know, as I'm going through and talking about all this stuff, I'm like, yeah, check mark, check mark, check mark, check mark. This is all working. But again, it's just not getting me excited. Yeah. I did think 2 things that were kind of interesting. I loved everything. I love prophecies and weird, you know, magical mumbo jumbo. So when Graydon was kind of, you know, first of all, I'm really curious, like Graydon speaking Nakadic, if that's how you say it, is very much like speaking parcel tongue in Harry Potter. Like, I'm like, you seem to know a lot about how the evil people talk. Like,
this is something Shannon brought up in the last episode, last review, that he thinks Graydon might be.
So, but it's almost like it's almost too obvious. Like he's so like, I know all the evil language stuff. So it is kind of interesting. You know, even when like they're talking about Ballantine and the other guys being infected and can you get them out? And Graydon's like, look, bad magic, evil magic is like an infection. And Willow's like, oh, are you the High Alderman now? Like, what the fuck? Like, they're really setting him up that he knows so much about the bad stuff. But yeah, all the weird sort of like, you know, the stars aligning, extinguishing the flames, snuff out the light, sacrifice the child to the 13th night. Like all of that stuff is really cool and interesting. And like Willow said, this is exactly what Bavmorda was trying to do to Elora Danan in the first movie. Right. So, you know, we never really knew in the first movie, and this is where just me being a fan of the movie kind of gets you through some of the stuff that's not really like jumping for you. Like Bavmorda was bad and was using evil powers and built her castle like in a very specific place to destroy Elora Danan. But we never got where her magic came from or what she was doing. So it'll be interesting to see if, as they develop this out, like was Bavmorda just another agent of the Crone? Like, is the Crone the big bad? Like, and was always the big bad? It's like, you know, so it'll be interesting to see how they tie it in. I mean, obviously by the end of this episode, they're definitely making connections given where they end up at the end of the episode. So I think that's all really interesting. So again, like everything seems cool. The one thing that I did think was funny is like they show up and it literally looks like the apocalypse, like the giant whirlwind of evil. And they're all like, oh yeah, like, and then Graydon's like, just, oh, the Crone is speaking and he's translating it. And they all seemed relatively calm. Yeah. For like, I was like, so like you come over the clearing and the horses stop and you're like, giant ball of evil speaking parcel tongue in the sky. And they're like, oh yeah. Willow's like, that's what Bavmorda was trying to do. All right, let's go fix this wagon. I was like, I don't think I would be that calm if hell opened up in the sky, but that's just me.
I mean, it's like the Hobbit standing going, looking at Sauron, the Eye of Sauron, going, oh yeah, so that's happening. So that's happening. I don't know.
Yeah, so that's happening.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's take a quick break, and I'm gonna jump into the next section of the show here right after this. All right, let's get into the next section of the show. Next section of the show here. Elora, after she escapes, and I forgot to ask Michael about this, but I'm going to ask him this in this section as we get through it. But of course, she kind of cuts herself free. Do we have to be that overboard with showing that a woman can get herself free? Do we need to be that overboard? Can't someone just be tied to a horse for a little while? I'm just a little confused by that. People do get captured. People do get tied to horses. Sometimes they have to stay tied to these horses. Is it because a woman, she has to cut herself free instead of Graydon cutting herself free? And it seems a bit like you're hammering the point home a little bit rather than feeling organic in the flow of things, because she's still trying to figure out about what is going on here, you know. And she's a simple cook in the kitchen. She's not like Elora Danan just yet. So just seemed a little bit like you're hammering the point home. But we'll get Michael's thoughts on that as we go along. But anyway, Elora stumbles upon a house. And stumbles upon the house of 2 woodsmen here, Hubert and Anne. Hubert being played by the great Hannah Waddingham here. And they are unfazed by Elora's fears. This is probably my favorite scene in the whole episode. Just Hannah is such a talent, man. Just the great confidence, the back and forth, the accent she's using, the exchanges between them. All of it works so well. And she introduces us to Rorgath, her axe. And initially, they're just like, you could calm down, Missy, pop a mushroom, tell us the whole story. But then when they realize that it's her, because she's talking about her issues with the princess and shows the scar on her arm, they pledge their allegiance to her, which I think is a really awesome moment. They have no idea what Immemorial City is or who Eric is, but they're willing to go on this journey with her. And then later we see the team is worried about which way to go through this section here, trying to find Elora. Do we go through the Pitiless Pass or do we go through the easier path? Well, this is a moment where Kit takes the opportunity to be like, well, I'm going to go with Boorman because Boorman wants to go through the Pitiless Pass to the slaughtered lamb there and take a look, and because that's where Waddingham was. So Kit wants to go, sends Jade off with the other people around the what Boorman claims is the longer path around, but who Silas claims is the safer path. Boorman says they can make it to the slaughtered lamb. Then Willow gets a vision all of a sudden with Elora being possessed, with her eyes turning white. What does that all mean? We don't know. Kit goes with Boorman through the pass, as I said. Ballantine confronts Hubert and initially gets the best of Hubert and then is stabbed because they come upon Hubert and Anne there. And Hubert whips out that axe, is going to go toe-to-toe with Ballantine, and gets him in the back. But then Ballantine uses his sword, stabs poor Hubert. Elora and Anne run off into the forest, get down to this little creek, as I would say back in the old days. And Elora gives herself up, pleading for Anne not to be killed. And then another person on Ballantine's crew comes through and kills Anne. And then Kit and then we cut to Kit and Boorman talking about Waddingham. The cuirass is not a weapon, but a shield against the darkness. So let's stop there. Mike, a lot going on here. This scene with Anne and Hubert, Hannah Waddingham, and the other actress. I'm going to bring up the name in just a second, but having a great conversation with Elora, then slowly realizing who she is, pledging their allegiance, and then all this other stuff that's happening with the separation of Kit and Jade here as well, and Ballantine coming on and confronting these two ladies. Your thoughts on this whole scene, on these whole sequences?
Yeah, I just like you, I thought the scene with Anne and Hubert was my favorite scene. Very, very curious scene. I mean, you have Elora Danan running through the woods, which is, dark and stormy. And then you come into this like sunny, gorgeous glade with two women who are dressed like Laura Dern in Jurassic Park. And they're just hanging out. And you're like, wait, what the fuck is going on? And then, Ballantine comes in and you have a brief battle and Hubert goes down and is dead. And I just don't know that you bring Hannah Waddingham onto a show to have her play Laura Dern for 10 seconds and then die. So I'm very curious about all of it. Yeah. I think there's more to them than appears to be. My initial thought, just because you were in the dark and then you came into this like beautiful idyllic grove, was that they were maybe fair folk, like the Fae. Charlindria is a fairy princess in the Willow movie. And we even get a mention of in this early flashback to Chimeria that Annabelle the Queen was of the fair folk. And so just like coming into this like beautiful glade and having these two sort of oddly anachronistic women who are just chilling out, who all of a sudden swear loyalty to you, and then instantly kind of both of them are killed. I just wonder if there's more to them. Like if we got to next week's episode and something happened and we walked into another glade and Hubert and Anne were there, even though they had just died, I don't think that I would be very surprised by that. Or conversely, although I don't know why her servant would kill her, is Hannah Waddingham going to be the crone? Is there going to be something where she just appeared to Elora Danan to try and lure her in, but then turns out to be the crone? I don't know. But it's all very curious. Like the whole thing was a lovely scene, and I think to your point about Hannah Waddingham being absolutely spectacular. Waddingham, sorry, Waddingham, being just a great actress. You can see how she's in the weirdest scene in this show. And it is one of the best scenes in the show because she's just delivering the weirdness in a really lovely way. So you really do see how anchoring a show that has this kind of back and forth tone with really, really strong performances is kind of a key thing that you want to do. All of it.
And that axe.
What? Yeah. And that axe. And that axe was no joke.
That axe without it coming back in some way as well, Michael. So
named after her father.
Yes, right. Yeah.
Rorgoth, this is my axe Rorgoth, named after my pa. So there's a lot there's a lot that was put into this scene.
Yeah.
To just be here's the two women that I met in the forest that instantly got killed. So I think there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. I'm curious to see where that goes. And then, so the splitting of the teams, Boorman and Kit going off to go do their thing. Yeah. Willow and the team going off to do their thing. And then what was the last part that we went through?
Just that they arrive at the slaughtered lamb and it's all burnt to the ground. And Kit is, Kit is questioning Boorman, wants to leave and go back. But then Boorman convinces her to stay. We go down there and we can go to the we get the Lux Arcana down there. They confront the were-rats and climb out of the situation. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, I do think one of the things that's interesting is as Kit and Boorman are on their way to the slaughtered lamb, and they're talking a little bit more about the Chimerian Cuirass and Mad Mardigan. So this is where he says that the Chimerian Cuirass is not a weapon as much as it's a shield against darkness. It's also where he says he's pretty sure that Mad Mardigan is dead. He didn't see the body, but he just feels like if he was alive, he would have come back. So again, this whole mystery of what exactly happened to Mad Mardigan, they're just gonna kick this all the way through. I mean, I think what happened to Mad Mardigan and what happened to the Chimerian Cuirass are very intertwined. The other thing he says, though, that I thought was interesting that makes me just a little bit curious is that he's kind of starting to tell the story from the flashback at the very beginning. And he says, when Thule impaled his brother, which means that the good sickly prince who was wearing the armor impaled his brother, which doesn't really seem like a hero thing to do. So I think there's a lot more to this story than meets the eye.
Yeah, well, and also the other part of this is that Boorman said he said at least a third of what he has said is the truth. So is that a clever just back and forth between them, or is he actually telling the truth that 2/3 of the things he says aren't necessarily true? So remember, this is a guy that was in the dungeon. Sorsa had him in the dungeon,
right,
and freed him for the fight. Then said it was okay for him to go along with Kit and the crew. So.
Well, and also don't forget in last week's episode, or in the first episode, when the Bone Reavers or whatever they were called came up on them, they were like, the one was like, Boorman, you're supposed to be dead. So they knew who he was too. So now the assumption is that Mad Mardigan and Boorman went out and fought the bad guys and had heroic things. But yes, as much as Shannon was saying last week that Graydon is definitely being set up to be a bad guy, Boorman is so fun and charming and lovable, and Mad Mardigan's squire and the one who's giving us all this information, but maybe there's equally as much of a chance that he could turn out to be the bad guy. Getting that Chimerian Cuirass for his own purposes. He's now got the Lux Arcana, so hasn't told anybody he has the Lux Arcana, kind of keeping that under his belt. So again, like more interesting things to see where it all rolls out.
I'm going to throw something out there, and it just occurred to me as you're talking, Mike, and I probably way off base, but there's a lot of magic in this series. There's a lot of unknown about who has powers, who doesn't have powers. We're hearing about these artifacts and their powers and what they can do. Is there a possibility? Because I mean, Boorman is essentially sitting in for Mardigan. The sarcasm, not being overwhelmed by situations, kind of being clumsy and awkward at times with his stuff. Is there a possibility that their souls were merged together and Mardigan is in essence inside Boorman, and so a piece of her father is inside Boorman? Is that how they kind of find a way to bring Kilmer's energy into the show without actually having Val Kilmer, who of course has the throat cancer and can't do full-time work? So do you think that's a possibility, or am I out in the stratosphere?
I think right now anything is a possibility. Okay. I don't know that they would do that because it just gets a little weird and creepy.
Well, I mean, he's not hitting on Kit
yet.
They've been friends, father. I mean, it feels like uncle niece, doesn't it?
It does. It starts to get a little bit. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I don't know. Yeah. It could be, but it would be. They'd have to really sell that well.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Let's take a quick break. We'll jump into the next section here, going into the finale of the episode after this. All right, Mike. So they fought the were-rats, and they're out from fighting the were-rats here. But then the other crew is moving the wagon, and we see Jade and Graydon are questioning Willow's abilities. And we see that that they confront Ballantine a little bit later with Elora trying to use her spells. Keen kills Silas as he saves Graydon, and Kit and Boorman show up here. So now we've got the entire crew once again fighting Ballantine and his entire crew back and forth in this whole situation. And Boorman has the Lux Arcana, doesn't tell Kit that he has the Lux Arcana, and we see Elora use her powers to, I think, burn one of the knights here. And as I said, we lose Silas in this whole situation. And then finally, Willow, who has said that he didn't want to use his magic, that he's saving his powers, because that's why he didn't levitate the wagon or doing this stuff, because he wants to save his powers for a confrontation with the crone, uses his magic, kills, I think, all the other people except for Ballantine. Ballantine is left barely alive. Jade walks up, and Ballantine has this beautiful, like, mentor-mentee, trainer-trainee, father-daughter back and forth with Jade, gives his blessing to her, and has her kill him so that the evil magic, which Graydon told us earlier, won't spread through his entire body and completely kill who he is as a person. And that was a really powerful moment between them as well. And then when it wraps up here, we get a little more knowledge about the castle that they're going to, and that is Castle Nockmaar, which is, of course, exactly the one from we saw in the first movie. And that's where Kit's grandmother, who was the villain in the first movie, is her castle in that is where it's located, essentially. So,
yeah.
Your thoughts on all of this, Mike? I mean, we lost Silas, which was a very sad death. We had a back and forth there with Silas and Willow as well, and him saying, give this to essentially his wife and tell him I tell her I fought a good fight and I died defending my best friend. So really sweet moment between them. Willow kind of broken up about it for sure. But then this idea of, and then of course Ballantine getting his head cut off, but then this idea that we're going to this castle. What do you think about all of this as it connects back up to the first movie?
Yeah, well, I mean, a few things. I mean, like one thing, like you were saying, like, we do learn a bit earlier that Willow does have magic.
Yes.
And when he was younger and was more resilient, his body could handle it. But as he's gotten older, it really takes a toll on him. And he's really reticent to use it because he thinks things are going to get really bad. But he's not sharing that information. I think something that's kind of a constant, if you look at like thematically what's going on here, is you have this fellowship that isn't really a fellowship. Like, yeah, right. Willow's supposed to be this big sorcerer, but isn't telling anybody why he's not using his magic. Graydon knows a whole lot about dark magic and is speaking Narcotic, and his dad whispered something in his ear in the first episode, but we don't know what it is. Jade was lying to Kit about letting her win. Just Boorman is being very vague, not telling anybody that he has the Lux Arcana. Like, so you have this fellowship of people, but they aren't really a unit yet. Yeah. Everybody is a little bit, Kit has her Elora Danan issues. And as I said, this is where I think the strength of the show lies, in the fact that in 3 episodes, you've introduced us to all these new characters, and there's all these interesting relationships and dynamics throughout. And I think that's really, really interesting. And so Willow not wanting to use his magic, wanting to save it, having it take a toll on his body, it's a big piece of information.
Yeah.
And then when you get to this big battle at the end, first, shout out to the weird, creepy, stop motion, animatronic Weir Rats. Like, I just love, as cheesy as the classic Willow was, I just do love that we're doing some more practical effects type of things in this and not doing a bunch of CG Weir Rats. So I thought it was cheesy and weird and kind of fun and kind of creepy. But yeah, so you have this big battle, and yeah, you've all these great moments. Silas has his big hero moment. Yeah. Graydon tries to help out and has his hero moment, which does sort of help a little bit, but also gets him infected. Yeah. The stuff between Ballantine and Jade, really, really lovely. I mean, Jade has to do some fucked up shit. Like, it's really, really, it's all nice all around. And then when Willow loses Silas, that's where, he says earlier, I can't let my emotions get the better of me. I have to think this through. And then he loses his best friend and his emotions get the better of him. And we see how powerful he is, but we also see the toll that it takes. Yeah. So, you sort of just, it's, again, I kind of felt the same way about this action sequence that I felt about the earlier one. Like, I'm going through, and from a writer standpoint, and from a story standpoint, I'm like, oh yeah, man, this slaughtered lamb battle delivered the goods. But from an execution standpoint, it just didn't have that epic feel that I think I wanted it to have. Like, so it checked all the boxes. I was like, I see what's happening, I got it, but I wasn't like bowled over by it.
Did you
And
get the feeling that it was like Game of Thrones? Like it was too dark? Was the battle too dark?
it was a little dark. I wasn't going to say anything because you and Shannon make fun of me every time I say that Game of Thrones is dark. But
I think they purposely shot it dark to kind of cover up that they can't do more, like the budget limits of the show.
I don't think so. I mean, look, the show's budget is definitely looks like it's less than say Andor, but I don't think that the budget is so constrained. Like they're definitely spending some money on the show. I think the issues with this action sequence, it's not that the set looked cheap. It's not that the actors don't look good. It's not like they don't have good weapons. Like I think that the weakness is more in the way that it's shot. Look, in a good sense, because look, it's not like it's Iron Fist on Netflix where I can't even tell what the hell is going on. Like it's like you can see what's happening, you can track all the action, which is important. But beyond that, there's just this level of I wish this was more dynamic. You know, like you just want those moments where you're like, oh, awesome, whoa, and it just felt a little bit more like it was just being executed, but not being executed with flair.
Yeah.
Sorry. And then like the big ending, great ending is like we get to Nockmaar. So, you know, Bavmorda's castle looks like it's ground zero for this great giant hell mouth in the sky that people aren't super stressed out about. Which makes sense because exactly like I was saying earlier, what the crone is trying to do in centralizing her power is basically what Bavmorda was trying to do in the first movie. So Nockmaar being sort of ground zero for this giant storm totally makes sense. And as we leave everybody, you know, like Elora Danan is back with the crew. Willow has used his magic and is going to need time to recover. Graydon is infected. Kit and Jade are having like their issues. Boorman has the Lux Arcana. So like 3 episodes in, you can't say that the series is moving at a snail's pace. Like things are chugging along. We've got a lot of big reveals. We've got a lot of things moving on. We got a lot of questions about these characters. So definitely plenty to keep me engaged and moving on. I just wish that when I watched it, I had more of like a thrill.
Yeah. I don't disagree with you. I think it's a combination of things. I think you're right. I think it's a little bit of the directing, a little bit of the writing, and a little bit of the acting, just all kind of not 100% nailing it. And because we've seen so many great shows this year, it's not necessarily that the expectations are high. It's more like the desire to see a show like this. If it's coming back, if it's going to be on Disney Plus, if it's going to be connected to some nostalgia, you want it to really knock it out of the park. And right now, it doesn't seem like it's quite getting there. It's like 75%. 80% there maybe, that, and you want it to be all the way there so you can really fully dial into these characters and what have you. But I was going to ask you what you thought story structure wise where we're at now after 3 episodes, but I think you already spoke about it.
Yeah.
We're going into Nockmaar and we've got a weakened Willow and we've got issues going on between Kit and Jade. Jade just having killed essentially her father figure mentor here, as you said to him with the Lux Arcana there. And Graydon infected with this evilness. Will that get worse as he goes in the castle? So many questions. And remember, Willow said earlier in the episode that what the crone wants to do is separate us away from each other, divide us so that we fight each other, so we never come together to fight the crone. So there's maybe that element will kind of bleed even more into their interactions going into the 4th episode for sure. So, all right, any final thoughts here, Mike, as we wrap up this review here for episode 3 of Willow?
But no, I mean, just kind of exactly what you said. Like, I think what's engaging about this show is that ultimately, and like you said, Willow said it, the crone is going to try and divide us. Yeah. And I think, I could be off base here, but I think that kind of one of the themes of the show is when you kind of like throw your vulnerability out there and you allow people in, that's what brings you together. Like right now, everybody is kind of keeping cards close to their chest. Yeah. You know, Kit and Jade had probably one of the strongest bonds, but that's sort of been naturally divided by some of the revelations that have happened in this episode. Boorman doesn't really know anybody. Nobody seems to really trust Boorman. Graydon, nobody really knows. Yeah. He's sort of got a little bit of a thing with Elora Danan. Kit kind of seemed to make up with him, but everybody is kind of circling each other and not really opening up and letting each other in. So is Willow 6 episodes or 8 episodes?
Oh, good question. Let me check real quick. Keep finishing your points and I'll check real quick.
Because I just think, you know, as we're getting in here, I mean, either way, we're either sort of at the halfway point, or I think it's probably more likely after next week we're going to be closer to the halfway point. And I think we're going to have to see that shift. Like right now, these people don't really feel like a fellowship. But I think what's going to happen in the next couple weeks, we're going to see them really open up to each other, kind of come together, and we're going to see them form this bond and really become a crew that's there for each other. And I think that's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah. I think in the next 2 episodes, I think it's a great point you bring up, Mike, because it is 8 episodes. The next 2 episodes are where we're going to make that turn and see who's in, who's out, and what storylines and what tragedy. There's got to be tragedy. It's fantasy. There's got to be tragedy. We already saw 2 deaths in one episode here in this episode that we're reviewing now. But with Graydon being infected, how does that play itself out? Because now, like you said, it's so obvious that he could have been the bad guy that I didn't think he was the bad guy. But now with the infection, the niceties, the overtures, the real care he seemed to show for Elora, how is that going to affect him and their relationship as this evil slowly starts to spread inside of his body? What's going to happen with that? So a lot of questions that are going to be, and what is Kit going to have to face about herself and about her father as these next 2 episodes go along as well? That I think it'll be fascinating to explore. And Willow himself, of course, for sure.
Yeah.
Not without his best friend by his side. What changes will we see in Willow?
Yeah, I mean, well, and I think sad to see Silas go. Wished he had stayed, but I think that kind of isolating Willow a little bit is going to force him to have to open up. Like, the person he's closest to in the Fellowship right now is Elora Danan, and he hasn't seen her since he stranger dangered her in that flashback. So, I wouldn't call them besties at the moment. Right. So I think that, I think that with the Graydon thing, that is definitely a natural. Like, you have Willow, who's depowered right now, and probably can't really help even if he wanted to. And you've got Elora Danan, who definitely has clearly shown she has magic, but doesn't know how to use it. Right. So having one of the members of your Fellowship infected and, kind of looking like they're going to go down the exact same road that Ballantine went down, this is sort of while we're in Nockmaar and Kit's dealing with the fact that she's in Grandma's castle, maybe this is where Willow and Elora Danan do kind of come together and start to become more of a mentor and mentee situation. So it's going to be interesting to see. Like, as I said, like, even though I watch the episode and I kind of get done and I'm like, all right, well, that was fine. It kind of, all the mythology stuff and the character relationship stuff kind of lodges in my brain, and I'm like, ooh, I wonder if this is going to happen. I wonder if they're the bad guy. I wonder if this is going to happen next. So in that respect, you got to give them props. They're doing a good job in that part.
Yeah, we'll see what Willow's daughter has to play in what part she has to play in all this as well, because a lot of people really loved her for the first 2 episodes. She responded to it on social media. So we'll see if maybe down the road, with Silas out of the way, there is a call for her to kind of find her way to this Fellowship, which would be really interesting as well. All right, well, thank you all so much for watching this spoiler review for episode 3 of Willow here on Disney+. We appreciate it madly. Michael, do you want to handle everything we need to tell them?
Sure. If you want to follow us on Twitter, we are at geek_buddies, at _geek_buddies on Instagram. If you would like to follow Rocha, you can follow him at the Rocha Says. If you would like to follow me, you can follow me at MKToon. Now, that being out of the way, we appreciate doing all of these. We appreciate doing all these reviews. We appreciate you guys listening. We love doing this. We want to keep doing it. And here's how you can help us out. Definitely smash that like button below. Leave your comments below. What did we miss? What were you confused about? What are you not confused about? What are we totally off base on? And what do you think is going to happen next? Let us know below. Love to hear what you guys think about this. If you are listening to us on a podcast, leave us some stars, leave us some comments. It helps us go up in the rankings. And as always, the best thing that you guys can do is retweet this video, post it on your socials, send it to your friends, and tell them to hang out with your buddies, the Geek Buddies.
There you go. And of course, a big shout out to Carbon Health, who continues to sponsor. That was a lot. Good job, Michael.
I got to go to Carbon Health after doing all that. So we need Shannon to get better soon.
No doubt. We send our best wishes out to Shannon. I hope you all do as well. Please reach out to him on social media and give him some love. But thank you so much. And, of course, big shout-out to Carbon Health, who continues to power and sponsor us here on the Geek Buddies all the way into 2023. We appreciate them madly. Make sure you go visit them at carbonhealth.com or download the app to have a dock in your pocket for those situations on the go. And certainly holidays, sharp ornaments, slippery ice, you might need to have that app in your pocket or in your on your phone so you can reach out.
Apparently, John thinks everybody's Christmas is Home Alone.
I'm just saying. You never know. You get older, you start slipping more. All right, we're out of here. Take care of yourselves. Be well. We'll talk to you next time with another brand new spoiler review episode here from the
Geek Buddies! Hey!